So we spent enough time in the weeds to be able to deeply appreciate the people that we hired to replace ourselves in those roles to make this the best possible company that we can.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. If you're enjoying this show, you already know what to do. Leave us that rating and review. And if you haven't done so already, for whatever reason, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now, we've got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Corinn Altomare. Corinn Altomare is a co-founder of Hearthfire Holdings, a private equity firm focused on self-storage with a growing portfolio across the Northeast and MidAtlantic regions. Now founded in 2012, Hearthfire began initially with multifamily assets, delivering average 23% IRR to investors in 5 full-cycle investments before pivoting first to self-storage back in 2019. Let's welcome to the show, Corinn Altomare.
John, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, Corinn, I went over your bio at a very high level, and I did get your name right, so I feel proud for myself. Pat on the back. But
Yes.
why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Sure. So this has been a 11-year journey now for my partner in life and business. We started out investing together during our courtship and made that official with a marriage and the company and all that. Learned a lot of lessons in multifamily, took those lessons learned and exponentially shortened our timeline for growth and trajectory of our company's evolution with self-storage. So learned a lot during our early years, wearing all the hats. It was a side hustle during our W-2 years, and then went full on with storage and real estate investing in the years following that. So looking forward to sharing whatever I can that's valuable today.
Absolutely. Well, listen, let's start there, right? Because, you mentioned, with your partner working through the courtship and started this investing journey. And I know for you, kind of with your background, one, help me understand why real estate. Why was this something that you wanted to invest in? And you did start with multifamily. So walk us through kind of the logic and the thinking of investing in multifamily assets.
So I'm gonna out myself here, right? But I came to real estate really not at all excited about real estate in and itself. I saw it as a tool to achieve more passive income, a little bit more financial grounding. My first acquisition was a multifamily in Philadelphia. And the purpose of that acquisition was so that I didn't have to stay stuck in my W-2. I was in my career before, I was an artist. I actually was a professional opera singer for a little over 10 years. And I joined the W-2 ranks. I worked for the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia as a project manager there. And that wasn't meant to be long-term, and it was not. It was 5 years and 1 month, because that's how long I needed to be there for them to match the 401k and for that to be vested. So I made sure that I followed the rules there to maximize my time. And I happened to have the best boss in the world that anyone could have asked for in that kind of situation. And so how I came to real estate investing, which I think was the question, I'm sorry, I know I squirreled there for a minute, but was really to give myself the option to do more of what I loved, no matter how much or how little it paid the bills, just to give myself some flexibility to, if I wanted to go back to being a full-time wandering musician, living out of a backpack, going from gig to gig, I would have a couple other tenants paying my mortgage and then some, or just give myself a little bit more choice in life. And now here we are with a team of 15 and over 50 million assets under management. So it has grown to be its own project and thing. And the passion now is on building something with incredible people amongst our team and serving our investors and really sharing the message. So thank you for having me here to share of the power of real estate. And you don't have to be, you don't have to give up everything in order to be the landlord taking the 2 a.m. calls, right? We've all done that, right? And so it's certainly a stepping stone in the journey, but that doesn't have to be your journey. We went through that in the early years, and through our opportunities, we're, offering to our investors a way to be passively involved and take advantage of that without having to give up whatever they're passionate about, whether it's family or a career or other pursuits. Life is all about having that flexibility and I believe, being able to pursue what makes you truly come alive and how you can leave the world slightly
Yeah.
better.
I love that, Corinne. On our website, we have a headline and it reads passive income to pursue your passions. And
And
I
I didn't even
love
read
that
that.
notion. Well, it's the same thing, right? But you get, I mean, it's there, right? And
Yeah.
that's the point,
Yeah.
right? It's you don't have to love real estate. And that's one of the first things I take away from what you just said is that this wasn't something you were clamoring for, right? You didn't study real estate in high school and in college and decide, you know what, I can't wait to be a landlord and own real estate.
No.
This was something that was a tool. It served a very specific role to help you as you went through your phases as an artist to give you some flexibility. And you also talked about, going from, being a professional opera singer to working for kind of the government and having to be there for 5 years and 1 month to, kind of get your 401k match before you moved on to something else. And I think it goes to show that, what I'm taking is you clearly wrestled with kind of your passion and work and what you want to do with your time, right? You obviously at some point decided, I need to go get something more stable, and you did that with this job. But the moment you could check out 5 years, 1 month, you were like, all right, I am done here. So talk to me about that, right? Because the investing is one thing. It's one thing, obviously, to make money, and certainly that plays a role. But I think you're someone who understands your passions and what you want to do in life. And you have been kind of finding your journey and finding your path along that way. And many of our listeners are too. You may be in your career and you're doing well, you're making money, but maybe you're not doing what you love. Maybe you feel like there should be more or something different. So talk to us about kind of what was going on through your mind during that time frame. And as you were starting to build this with your partner and realizing that, well, maybe this is something we can do a little bit more of.
Gosh, there's so much to speak to there. So, yes, I cannot tell you in with any sort of integrity that building this company as it is today was what we started out intending to do. We jumped in together, really just buying real estate assets ourselves, myself individually, personally, then together. And then we started doing small syndication, small, with just family and incredibly close friends. And they went well. And we saw how that was able to touch their lives. There are some personal stories of just being able, and I won't, because they're not my stories to tell, but of being able to provide passive distributions to our investors when they were going through massive life changes or needed that. And we were able to provide for that. And that's huge. That's a really, really powerful thing to know that you're a part of doing. And so from there, we also my partner Sergio, he had spent over 20 years at the Fed and climbed the ranks and got to that dream C-suite job where he thought, yes, finally, I'm in the room where I've wanted to be my entire career. And it wasn't at all what he expected. And it was, we were seeing more immediate impact and change in what we were doing in the day-to-day with the real estate than some of the red tape. I mean, working in a large organization, meetings and bureaucracy, and you can fill in all the gaps there. So part of the joy of building your own company is you can see immediate growth, you can see immediate changes happening, and that gets to be quite addictive, right? So then you're like, okay, how can I do more? How can we continue this? So we came to that point where it was right for first me to quit, and then a year later he quit, and we were both full-time on this. That also coincided with the birth of our daughter, so there was a lot going on in those 2 years. I don't know if that answered your question. If it didn't, I'm sorry, but feel free to
Yeah,
ask again.
that's a lot of change in a very little bit of time, right? Both of you leaving your
Yeah.
jobs, having the birth of your daughter. But what you talked about was recognizing that, you didn't really start off on this journey intentionally to build this real estate business, but you were you were getting some sort of gratification, right? Helping the friends, helping the family members, get some passive income, seeing the impact you could have, growing this business, growing the portfolio. And it became clear that this was more of a passion than what you guys were doing in your day job, and that there was more upside in building this business than, even though that there was 20 plus years invested, in the day job for Sergio. It made more sense to focus on the growth potential of this business. So I just think it's really important for people to understand that there are elements of the business that are obviously rooted in real estate and construction and property management, all that thing. But there are other components of this that are really about something bigger and impacting people and figuring out how you can help other individuals. And that's really important as well. So talk to me about the company, where are you at today? I know you mentioned that you have kind of 15 employees, you're around $50 million worth of assets under management, and you focus on self-storage now. So talk to us about the company.
Sure. So I'm trying to think of the intro that you gave and not repeat any of that. So we decided to make the shift to storage around 2017. We were both working at the Fed, and we know that economic cycles go in 8 to 10 years. So counting back from 2008, we were expecting a market correction of some sort and fashion somewhere between 2018 and 2020. So we positioned our multifamilies to sell and wanted to get into a more recession resilient asset. So that's how we landed upon storage, educated ourselves about it, educated our investors about it so that they would ideally make the jump with us. And so that is what we did. We sold all the multifamilies, redeployed that capital into our first acquisition in August of 2019. That acquisition was simply an existing storage facility that didn't have any tech really, which played right to our strengths because that's what we did at the Fed. And so the first real estate acquisition in self-storage was really a tech project management, project implementation play, standing up the website, implementing the back-end management system, same as you do in property management, right? We used Propertyware for our multifamily portfolio. So there are similar complements in the storage industry that are specific to the nuts and bolts back-end operations for storage. Setting up self-service, right? So having a mobile-enabled website where tenants can access as much as they need during the customer lifecycle with minimal involvement from us. And so that was our whole business plan. And we got that up and implemented just in the nick of time for COVID to hit and us all to go contactless. And so we were able to continue operating really without skipping any beats because we had gotten all of that up and running in our first few months. So that's the very beginning of the company. 2021, we acquired another 10 assets. I'm skipping over 20 because that was mostly just a breathe, hang on, see how the world's going to shake out year. And then 2021, we more than made up for that in velocity with 10 more acquisitions, expanding our footprint in Pennsylvania, and then also branching out at the end of 21 into a new state. So we stayed close to home. Philadelphia is kind of our home base. We're in a suburb about an hour outside of Philly. So our acquisitions are in the Lancaster kind of Amish country market, right? So very, very suburban. I would say some of them even are fully rural, right? You've got horse and buggy Amish. I mean, it's beautifully picturesque, right? It's beautiful countryside. It's prime opportunity for what we're looking for, where we're simply adding technology, adding more modern business operations to what we do in the storage facilities. And jumping ahead another year and a half to today, I mentioned in my first answer to your question about the lessons learned in multifamily and what we took in our start to storage from all those lessons. And that's really been in building a team. In real estate, even if you're doing one single family home, you can't do it yourself. This is a team sport. And certainly at the scale that we are now playing at, it is absolutely a team sport. And so we took our experiences in multifamily where we tried to do everything ourselves, right? We were being very very, very diligent with being with investor money and doing all of the work for free ourselves, right from hanging drywall and all kinds of war stories. I won't go there because we'll spend the next 2 hours there. But so from that, when we launched into storage, we focused immediately on who are we going to need to build up around us to make sure that this can scale and grow, because us being the ones wearing all the hats and doing all the things is not sustainable, it's not healthy, it's not serving to the best delivery of the investors capital as well. So we have been very much focused on hiring experts, hiring deep industry experience to build out our team. We spent enough time in the boots in the ground. We operated the first facility ourselves. We bought a travel trailer and lived there on site. So we spent enough time in the weeds to be able to deeply appreciate the people that we hired to replace ourselves in those roles, and then be able to move on to focus to building out the team, hiring the quality of people that we need to make this the best possible company that we can.
Yeah,
Hopefully that
I think
was.
that's yeah, I think it's really interesting you talk about lessons learned from multifamily, doing everything yourself, focusing on building out the team instead. And you mentioned that, when you make that transition, one of the things that drove you was you wanted to be in a more recession resistant asset like self storage. And many people see multifamily as recession resistant. And I think there's a good argument to be made that both asset class, both can be true, right? But there's something about self storage that you felt was more comfortable in making that transition. Just really quickly, elaborate a little bit more on, why you felt self-storage was a little bit more recession resistant.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, there's certain data points that show how it performed in '08 compared to other asset classes. I'm not going to remember the numbers off the top of my head, but there are certain numbers and data there. We also were chasing scale. And so we found that in storage, we have lesser risk navigating landlord tenant laws, right? Navigating expenses, renovations, all of that, which we experienced in Philly with our first portfolio. Lower risk, more simpler business model from that perspective, because it's customers are storing their things. As long as you're doing it right, you don't have people living in your storage units, right? It's a different relationship. And then there are also more opportunities on the business side of storage to more financial levers to push to hit your bottom line, your NOI. So on the business side, it functions a little bit more closely to hospitality or airlines, if you will. So a quick scenario. If I have only one 10 by 10 unit left, that unit is going to be priced at least 20% higher than any others because it's the last one, right? So it's a supply and demand play here. And our backend management systems have rules and automation built in to automatically do that. So it's not as if my manager has to remember or be able to handle that on the phone. There's technology and automation that implements that right off the bat. That's not so, and because the leases are month to month, we can play with that every given month based on what your occupancy rates, what time of year it is in the market. Here in the Northeast, we are highly seasonal. In other regions, we're maybe less so, but generally leasing season models along with the multifamily move in, move out season, right? Spring through summer. So rates and activity is generally higher during that season than wintertime. So to answer your question about the recession resiliency of storage, I have to remind myself there. There is talked about generally the 4Ds: death, divorce, dislocation, and downsizing. So in recessionary times, you have higher instances of all of that. In great times, people acquire more things, maybe need storage for other reasons as they upscale their life, etc. We saw that very much in COVID. COVID ended up being a huge boon to the industry. I mean, rates were up, I believe it was 20% year over year during the COVID season. They've now adjusted a bit back down more to normal levels, but they are still higher than they were pre-COVID. Something also that we're seeing in storage is a growing rate of adoption. So depending on your, there was this talk a few years ago about with the whole Marie Kondo movement and minimalism and the younger generations, like, are they going to need or use storage? What we have seen now is that, yes, the younger generations absolutely do. COVID allowed us to present storage as a service on demand, right? So with technology, with being able to find the nearest storage near you on your phone, move in, find the unit that works for you, reserve it, pay for it, sign all your documents electronically, move in all within minutes. So by leveraging technology, we're able to bring it to the younger generations that are more technology driven, and they're using it for I mean, really anything from in the urban areas, additional closet, or if they are, if folks are wanting to pursue this work from anywhere, right? Go live in Spain for 3 months, but maybe you want to make sure that your things are safe and secure. Storage provides a solution for that at a much lower price point than keeping your apartment.
Yeah,
Hopefully
I
that
love
answers
it.
some of the
It
question.
does. It does. And I think it's helpful for people to understand that, right? Because there's data that supports, how resilient self-storage is. And to your point, going back to even 2018, we were hearing a lot of the same things, right? We were expecting the market to shift from multifamily. I remember we had an 8 unit at that time, and we ended up selling that and kind of transitioning, and that kind of kicked off, our approach to scaling into larger deals as well. So everything you're saying makes a lot of sense, especially about the technology and making it more applicable and accessible for that younger generation. For those folks who are maybe considering investing in self storage, but their perspective or their experience thus far is really rooted in multifamily, what are some things they need to pay attention to or to consider when looking to invest in self storage compared to, say, multifamily?
The biggest thing in storage is supply demand, and it's storage is a 3 to 5 mile game. It's a 1 mile market in heavy urban centers. Honestly, we don't even play in urban centers. That's where the REITs dominate. It can be very tough to find anything that pencils in those kinds of markets. So that's why we are very much in the secondary, tertiary markets. We are starting to see REITs enter those markets. There was Extra Space acquired Storage Express in September of 22. That was a huge acquisition. It was 107 sites, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, like middle America, rural sites. So that was a big headline because that showed that the REITs are starting to expand beyond their urban markets. Extra's been on a buying tear lately because about 3 weeks ago, they also acquired Life Storage. Life Storage was receiving some hostile takeover bids from public, and then Extra came in and got them to a number that made sense. So I'm not answering a question. I'm sorry. There's just some of these other macro things that are happening that support our thesis that there's still fantastic opportunity here by seeing the ownership consolidation, right? Seeing the REITs kind of come into other markets where we already are, like that's our end goal strategy, right? But so for someone who is looking to get into storage, supply demand is the first and foremost. There are tools. There's a tool called Store Track where you can plug in an address and look at how much inventory is in the market, how much is in the pipeline that has already either gone through zoning or is in some stage where Store Track has been able to scrape the data to see if there's new developments coming in the pipeline. During the course of due diligence, you absolutely have to go to local records and make sure that there's nothing else coming in, because if a big player comes into the market, floods the market with inventory, that's going to drive your prices down. That's going to be bad for everyone. So that is first and foremost. If you know absolutely nothing about storage and are starting from square one, I'm going to come back to building your team, right? And there are plenty of vendors in the space that will do feasibility studies for you that can help you with unit mix and configuration to really provide, well, if you're doing ground up development, sorry. So I immediately jumped there because that's what we're doing more of right now. So if you're going from raw land to actually building storage in a market where there is none or there's a gap, if you're acquiring an existing I would see there are still opportunities in secondary, tertiary markets of independent mom and pop operators who perhaps have not maximized technology yet. So there are simple operational improvements that can be implemented. Most of the story's out on that. So folks nowadays know what they have. They have brokers pounding their doors, offering to give them estimates of value all day, every day. But I would say, start in your backyard first. That was what was successful for us. As a husband-wife team, our first offer was a background story of who we are, where we came from, who our investors were with us, our whole story, just in order to try to differentiate ourselves from multiple other offers. Now, that message was truly ours, right? I'm not telling your listeners to be someone that you're not. So that's the approach that we took. That resonated with the one deal that did successfully close. And so that's how we were able to get our first acquisition and get our foot into the door.
I think the takeaway for me is, first of all, understand that, this is really a local game. So for that person who's the user, in many markets, if you're in that big urban center, you're looking at a 1 mile radius. If you are in a more secondary or tertiary market, it's more of a 3 to 5 mile radius. And you want to understand who else is there. What are the other options available? And that's the way you're going to look at these deals and these opportunities, but also recognize that, people are aware, these mom and pop owners, they're aware of what's going on with self-storage right now. So you're probably not going to get something for 50 cents on the dollar, but, you can still find some deals and, think about the business plan, think about how you want to create value, and that's going to be the best approach for you. With that said, for people who want to learn a little bit more and maybe check out some of the deals that you're working on, your website is hfireholdings.com. So they can go there and learn a little bit more, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Awesome. Well, make sure we check that out. And right now we're going to go to our round of insights. Ready?
Ready.
All right. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
Well, if they were failures, I wouldn't be here talking with you, John. No, honestly, I think it's just a perspective thing, right? So what can be viewed as a failure through another lens is the furthest thing from. I have made multiple shifts in my life. I spent 10 years in music. I spent, another 10 years in multifamily, and now we're 10 years into storage. So, I didn't make it to the Met stage. Was that a failure, or it got me here? So that's my non-answer to your question.
Well, give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
Oh, so for my business. Okay. Well, Remarkable, or I guess this is backwards, but the Remarkable we use for all kinds of personal note-taking, planning. I like writing, so I find it easier than schlepping around different paper notebooks and then losing the paper on the Remarkable. It's all synced between my laptop, the cloud, and wherever I go. Not necessarily for the business, but this is also kind of on the mindset answer that I gave to the previous question. I use Insight Timer, not every day. I would say 3 to 5 days a week, depending on 3 to 5 days a week. And this is such a mental game. This is such a mental practice and exercise. So tapping tools to make sure that I'm in the absolute right space to manage whatever comes at me at any given day is critical.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
We've talked about Traction a lot, and we have gifted the most Holy Moments by Matthew Kelly.
All right, give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
Meditation and movement. I'm an early morning person, so when I leave everything on the workout floor or on the mat or with the weights, then the rest of the day is easier.
What's your number one insight for self-storage investing?
Build your team, identify your team, and get started. You will learn so much by just being in the game. So I would recommend people to just get in it and learn as you go.
I love it. Well, listen, let's lighten the mood a little bit. You are outside of the Philadelphia area, so give us your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Okay, I have a story with this one. So the place is called Zaytoon, and it's in Exton. It just opened up, I guess, last year or so. The founder is a wonderful, it's a fantastic Lebanese restaurant, like homemade Lebanese food. Really incredible. It's a tiny hole in the wall place in a strip mall, like nothing incredibly fancy, but the food is amazing. And this is his dream. Talk about people living with passion, right? Um, this gentleman, he actually redid our kitchen, and that was his like carpentry, custom carpentry was what he did, but he always had this lifelong dream of opening up a restaurant. And so we were the last job that he ever did. And then he went and, gosh darn it, he opened his restaurant, and we went there one night and it was full and the food was amazing. And they have this little market attached to it where you can, like, because he imports the food, the olives, that like just this incredible olive oil, incredible food. And so to see and be able to support another person who's living out their dream, right? And for the food and the experience to be wonderful, of course, is icing on the cake. So Zaytoon in Exton.
I love it. And the thing I love too is that, you're talking about another creator, right? This is a creative person. They use that, sometimes in carpentry and kind of, rehabbing homes, but also in preparing these meals and open up this restaurant. And we talk about those passions and, figuring out how to make enough money so you can pursue your passions. I think it's a great way to end the conversation. But, kind of going back to your story, Corinne, you talked about, your love for music and being an opera singer, kind of getting that W-2 job and doing what you need to do. The moment you could move out of that 5 years and 1 month, you made that transition. But using real estate as a tool, using it as a tool, you don't have to love every aspect of it, but it's a great tool that can help you achieve your financial goals. Not only have you been able to do that for yourselves and your family, but you'll be able to do that for other people as well. For folks who want to learn a little bit more, they can check out your website at hfireholdings.com. Corinn, I just want to thank you again for being a great guest, coming on, talking to us about self-storage and your transition. And I just want to thank you again. So we look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you, John. It's been a pleasure.